And yet, what is the Republican Party offering? Every single one of their candidates for governor, and most, if not all, of their legislative candidates, believes that the main way to solve the state's budget crisis is to cut spending and hold the line on taxes, which of course always sounds good on the surface, until you realize that if we literally did that, it would be a catastrophe for education, a catastrophe for social services, a catastrophe for local governments, and would cause the loss of over 128,000 jobs during an economic depression. So when they talk about doing this, it's either a delusion, a recipe for disaster, or both. The central problem in Illinois and American politics today is that we have a government run by the same giant corporate and banking interests that have brought us to ruin. These interests use the Democratic and Republican parties to get the exact same results by slightly different means. And as long as we have that, as long as we have government by the highest bidders, government of, by, and for the wealthy and powerful, the problems we face will not be solved. What the current state of the state should tell us is that there is an overwhelming need for new political leadership, leadership that comes from the people and the progressive movements that already have most of the policy answers to the problems facing us today. We need leadership that comes from the movements for peace, social justice, civil rights, the environment, labor, women's rights, real health care reform, education reform, and grassroots democracy, including economic democracy. We need leadership that comes from a real people's political party, a party based on these movements and their core principles. A party that does not accept corporate money and its corrupting influence. That's where I come from. That's what my campaign is about. That's what the Green Party is about. I am fighting for the sound policy solutions that most Illinoisans already support, but which can't get past the roadblocks erected by the Republican and Democratic parties and the corporate interests that bankroll and lobby them. That's why I am the only candidate in this race who stands for a comprehensive tax reform, not just raising the income tax with no conditions, but a whole package to guarantee funding for education, property tax relief, lower the burden on lower and middle income working people, erase the structural deficit, pay healthcare providers and schools on time, and meet rather than cheat our pension obligations. That's why I am the only candidate in this race who proposes to fund public improvements and promote economic health without any further tax increases through the establishment of a state bank, a progressive idea that North Dakota adopted years ago and that has helped keep that state debt-free even in these troubled economic times. Instead of going into more and more debt to further enrich private banks, we should be using our tax revenue to further invest in our own state and its people for the enrichment of our own economy. I am the only candidate in this race who recognizes the obligation of government to treat the twin threats of global climate change and the end of the era of cheap oil as the 911 emergency that it is, with a 21st century capital bill to build renewable energy generation and energy-efficient housing, buildings, and appliances here in Illinois, build sustainable transportation with an emphasis on efficient mass transit, promote local agriculture for local consumption, promote smart urban planning and renewal, and otherwise transition to a new, healthier, more affordable green economy. I am the only candidate in this race who will fight for a real living wage law and who will use the power of eminent domain to reclaim abandoned factories and facilities for the people and provide communities with the means to retool them and reopen them as worker-owned enterprises. I am the only candidate in this race who understands the need to make education a top priority, who dares to say we can and must make higher education free to all Illinois residents who qualify academically as an economic and social imperative, instead of making it increasingly out of reach for all but the rich, and miring the next generation with absurd levels of debt. I am the only candidate in this race who will put an end to the wasteful war on drugs and focus our criminal justice resources where truly needed, with a new emphasis on rehabilitation and providing real assistance to felons after they are released from prison to help them succeed. I am the only candidate in this race who will wage an uncompromising fight for a single-payer, improved Medicare for all healthcare system here in Illinois, since our federal government has seen fit to reject the needs and express will of the people. And I am the only candidate in the race who is making an issue of the illegal, immoral, and obscenely costly occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, which has cost our state, by the way, our own Illinois share, over $42 billion to date, by promising to resist these illegal wars as governor, by vetoing any further overseas deployment of our National Guard. In 2010, voters will have a choice to make, and it's a simple one. You all know the definition of insanity: doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. You can continue to vote in the same Democratic or Republican candidates yet again and just hope that somehow things will get better. Or you can vote for the candidates that are serious about establishing government of, by, and for the people. Myself, Rich Whitney, for governor, Don Crawford for lieutenant governor, Lee Allen Jones for U.S. Senate, people like Charlie Howe for state rep here in the 115th district, and the dozens of other Green Party candidates running for office at all levels of government throughout Illinois. The choice is yours. But if you vote in the same people who put us in this predicament, you cannot expect a different result.